Hello, everybody. If you're seeing this screen, you're in the right place. We will begin shortly. We just want to allow everybody a chance to sign in and log on. We know sometimes that takes an extra minute or two. Okay, well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. We are here for the Santa Clara Community Park third workshop. Thanks for joining us. The purpose of our last workshop, is to provide you a summary of the planning process, the resulting master plan, the phasing, the timing, and expectations for the park's development. And while we're still here on our landing slide, I just want to point out that everybody should have at the top of their screen or side of their screen a toolbar that looks like this. And if you'll notice, there's a Q&A button. Anytime during the presentation, you're welcome to click on that Q&A button and type in your questions and click submit. We will answer all those questions at the end of the webinar after we present the plans and phasing plans, and bring them up one at a time and read them out loud so everybody can benefit from them. I'll let you know that the chat feature is enabled and our workshop is being recorded. So with that, we will go ahead and begin. So, good reminder is that our Engage Eugene website includes a section for the Santa Clara Community Park, where you can get information on past and future planned events, links, and current drawings. Within a day or so, a recording of tonight's presentation will be available there as well. That website can be found at engage.eugene-or.gov/Santa Clara Park. Please, we ask that you do take the survey. It's the best way we have to hear from you. And there will be a Spanish version of the survey up shortly as well. For those of you who have called in today and are on your telephone, don't have access to the video or the Q&A function, I would like to give you a phone number that you can call during regular work hours to discuss the project with me. That number is 541-682-4902. I'll repeat that again. It's 541-682-4902. You can also reach me by email at mkosmos@eugene-or.gov. Tonight's agenda will start with a quick recap, followed by the draft master plan for the park. We know that some of you may be joining us for the first time, so while the recap doesn't include all of our Survey 2 results, we would like to remind you that the recording and reports from prior workshops are always available right there on the website. Before we leave today, we will share our draft approach to the Phase 1 recommendations and then answer questions at the end of the webinar. We have a team of staff and partners who joined us this evening. It's quite a robust list, and I will introduce them just prior to the Q&A so that their names can be fresh for you. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and just begin. We want to
Hey,
thank
Mark.
Yes, Carolyn.
Hi, this is Carolyn. Sorry to interrupt. Can you elevate Emily as a panelist?
I'm sorry, you bet. Hang on just
Thanks.
a second here. Got her. Excellent. So to recap, we wanted to thank our Eugene voters for passing the 2018 bond and levy measure. It makes this process possible for prioritizing the needs of the Santa Clara community, as well as realizing them in the construction of a community park in 2022 and 2023. As a reminder, the bond funds the construction and the levy funds the ongoing maintenance. The master plan, of course, looks ahead for all the elements that will eventually be included in the park, like the community center, pool, and of course the park that we're here to talk about today in Santa Clara. The park is our highest priority, and the plan also takes into account your community feedback from the workshops, but most importantly from the surveys. The park and park amenities are prioritized in our phasing. Our schedule was to first identify these phase one priorities in in a master plan in 2020 and 2021, and that's where we are right now. From there, we're going to refine those plans and develop design and bid documents in the following year, 2021 and 2, and then we'll look at constructing those phase one elements in 2022 or 3. Future phases down here, when they occur and what is included, won't be finalized for some time, but we want you to know that phase two is still a priority for us in the next 5 to 10 years, and that's what this schedule reflects. We would love to build everything in the master plan ASAP, but funding is limited, so that's why we're doing this, so we can prioritize our choices. Future phases, what's included, and when that will happen can be as far as 30 years out. So as we look at the community center and pool, we get a little bit broader in our range and our guesstimate of when that would occur. So to summarize our surveys number 1 and 2 and workshops on a very high level, we wanted you to know that we use those surveys and workshops to inform our priorities. And to remember that we look at fundamental park elements such as the playgrounds, restrooms, and parking. And we weigh all those uh, in addition to your feedback against our budgets and our practical concerns about construction and phasing. And then we do it again, and we do it with you in this public format. In our first survey, we heard that the restrooms and the furnishings and pedestrian access were very important to the future park users. So our plans started to reflect those community priorities. As we moved on to our second survey, we heard from, at this point, 235 participants, and 160 of them were new, which is great. That was great attendance. And while some of those priorities were consistent with what we heard previously, excuse me, we were good listeners. We looked at the written feedback from the survey, and we heard that we didn't have enough for youth and teens in the park. So you'll notice that we've added a skate spot, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You'll see that on our plans, and you'll also see that the number of trees, both proposed and protected within the new design, have gone up since the last plan because we know how everybody appreciates the natural areas and remnant oxbows that are there now. So our goal is a plan that develops and designs a park that's unique and special to the Santa Clara community, and one that meets the prioritized needs and, of course, the values of that community. Remember, additional links, images, and schedule can be found on Engage Eugene. This is just a very brief overview. So let's get started. This is our draft master plan. It is a culmination of the Parks and Recreation System Plan and community input from our workshops and surveys. Let's get oriented first to the major zones of the park, and then we'll drill down into detail on subsequent slides. In general, we refer to this as the north, and this is the south part of the park. So for the zones, as you can see, we continue to balance most of the park amenities on the north part of the site. And I'll point out that we integrated the skate spot here, just south of the parking lot and right next to the playground area. The future community center and pool are located in the south part of the site along with the dog park. And parking is still included on both the north and the south halves of the park. Again, this is our draft master plan, and at full build out, we wanted to show how all of these park amenities integrate with each other and with the site. Our north parking is located off of River Loop 2. We have our schoolhouse and community garden. We have our large irrigated lawn, our court sports. Center to the whole design is our playground. And then, of course, we have our bridge connecting us to those future pieces. So now let's look at just the north. For orientation, again, this is River Loop 2. Madison Middle School is to the south of us here. And what we're going to show here is a little bit more detail and explore some adjacent relationships between park elements. We're going to work our way clockwise around the site, starting at the main parking lot. We enter from River Loop 2, either by car or on foot, and you'll see here that we have multiple sidewalks and access points that get you into the park. We also heard that during our surveys that getting to the park from the neighborhoods was pretty important, and that having sidewalks was pretty important as well. So you'll see here we are showing a boulevard tree planting with a detached separated sidewalk that can join the entire north end of the park and allow for all those points of access for pedestrians. So it's important to know that we are listening and we are looking at those features and planning them, especially into the phasing of our park. All the sidewalks here lead to the flexible event plaza, which is our main greeting area. And that is located right next to our schoolhouse. This is a historic schoolhouse, and it includes on either side an integrated fruit tree orchard, as well as a community garden to the south. You'll see here, I've circled to make note, these are the preserved existing trees that are now integrated into the design. We finally had our survey completed and we were able to take a look at that. And you'll see that there are some minor tweaks and changes so that we can integrate and preserve all those great trees that the community is very happy about. All these existing trees, I show with a little plus in them in case you're looking at the plans out at the kiosk. Now, the city has been having conversations with the Santa Clara Community Organization about this, the Santa Clara Schoolhouse, about using it for community use. Its location and its function fits in very nicely with all of the program elements around here. And since the schoolhouse renovation will be occurring on a parallel timeline with the phasing of some of these improvements, we may need to make a couple of minor adjustments over time. But I think this would be a good opportunity to introduce Kate Purley. She is the chair of the Santa Clara Community Organization, and she's going to share with us an update on the schoolhouse.
Hi, thanks for being here this evening. We really appreciate when the community steps up and participates with projects and initiatives that are happening in the neighborhood. So some of you may be aware that we've been looking at trying to have the city work with us to let the community organization take ownership of the schoolhouse and rehabilitate it back to its one room character and use it as a community flexible meeting space. If you've lived in Santa Clara for any length of time, you know that we don't have access to any public spaces, any buildings. We often meet at the behest of our fire district and our churches in their spaces. And so this would be a great leap forward for us as an organization and as a neighborhood. And our first two steps to do that were to check in with the membership and take a general membership vote. And we realized we would need to form a nonprofit organization. So we had a legal entity that was able to enter into an agreement with the city. And we, after we did that, then we would be able to pursue an agreement with the city of Eugene. And both of those votes went to our general membership in November and were passed by a great margin. And so we're just getting started, and we've submitted paperwork for creating a nonprofit, and we look forward to moving this project ahead with all kinds of community support and volunteerism into the future. So I just encourage you, if you have any interest in this, to get involved. And you'll see on the screen, you can access information on how to sign up and how to get updates at our community organization webpage. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. And for those that may not have video, that website is www.santaclaracommunity.org. So let's continue. We're going to keep going clockwise and look at some of the other detail on this north site enlargement plan. Our natural area and trail still buffers the perimeter of the park, only with more proposed trees and a preservation of the existing one along the old oxbows. We have moved and resized the spray play for better integration with the open lawn, and we're beginning to show seating and locations for picnic tables in all of our major use areas. Here near the flexible event plaza, across from the playground, overlooking the playground on the south, as well as over here near the skate spot and in the community garden. We continue to show two large rentable group shelters overlooking the irrigated lawn. And we're also showing a smaller shelter located near the court sports area that is closest to Madison Middle School. Now this is our south enlargement plan. This is also, I've been referring to this as our interim plan for the south end of the park. So we can expect to have this extra large area for a dog park before we get to the final phases. So for now, the community center and the parking and the pool and all those far out deadline placeholders that we have are shown ghosted in the background. But since they're planned far out, we can use the area in the interim as a dog park and even provide some closer in parking. The ADA parking is still served by the main parking lot from the north. Oops. Main parking lot from the north coming down over the bridge. And the dog park would have 2 points of entry with some interior separation that's not shown yet for large and small dogs, as well as some closure options so that we can take care of the site and maintain it over time. Now, in the coming months, down here on the south, you may see some access control fencing being installed, and that's mainly to deter unwanted vehicle access into the field. That will likely occur before we put in the dog park, but we're planning on integrating those two fences somehow to double up on that use. Now, this is our proposed phase 1 improvement plan for the park. Funding and priorities are based on basic service level needs and community input. And we're focusing on the core developed area here in the north part of the park for a budget of $4 million. So let's review what's in the currently proposed phase 1 for the park. So on the north end, we are still coming in off of River Loop Road, and we're showing half of the parking since some of the features are being deferred to a future phase. That will serve the park with flexible event plaza, serving as the orientation location for the site. We are, for now, including the future community garden as part of the natural area, as well as all the trees that are out there right now. And that's based on some of the priorities that were identified in the surveys and the budgets that we have. We are including the natural area and soft surface trails on the perimeter. We are including the playground, the sand play feature, and the connection, and of course the planting beds. Some of those are for mitigating stormwater runoff off the site. And the restroom, of course, which was the highest priority item identified by everybody in the first and second survey. Now, we are showing here just one of the 3 group shelters, the 25 by 50 group shelters. The second one would be located just north of it here. And we're including that main walk so that we can have a connection out to the dog park from our parking lot. This, of course, is where all of our ADA parking is and gives us access to the playground and site. So that's what's in, and what's out, what's being ghosted, shown here in the background. I've hidden those labels, is about half of that north parking lot, as well as that large walkway, that 12-foot walkway that connects us all the way down here to the south. If you remember from previous workshops, there is a plan to extend the bike access from South Santa Clara all the way up here to this intersection at Wilkes and River Loop. And so we would like to have that main walk continue and get people up to River Loop too without having to go around on the street. We have deferred to a future phase, the community garden, located here, the spray play, the court sports, and one large and one small shelter, but we are still retaining the one group shelter here. The skate spot is also being deferred to a future phase. So now I would ask that our panelists and partners please unmute and also turn on your videos so that we can address and answer questions. We have asked Philip Richardson to go ahead and start reading some of the questions that we have in the Q&A that have been typed in. You're welcome to continue typing and writing in your questions, and we'll address them in some order. We'll read them aloud so that everybody has the benefit of seeing them and go from there. So let's see if I can, I'm not seeing everybody's video. Am I holding that up?
Yep.
I am, let's see. Is Alyssa on the call?
Hey, yeah, I'm here.
I'm hoping to get some help. Apparently I have everybody's video disabled. Let me, if you wouldn't mind helping me with that while I introduce everybody, that would be awesome.
Can you promote me to co-host, Mark?
Oh, sure. There we go. Sorry about that. That was Alyssa Gavette, everybody. She's a rock star at just about everything. I'm Mark Cosmos. I'm the project manager for the park. Kate Purley is with us. She is with the Santa Clara Community Organization. You heard from her earlier. And maybe I'm going a little too quickly because now everybody's videos, Alyssa's probably working hard to get everybody enabled here.
Panelists should be able to turn their videos on now.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yes.
There's always something. Let me back up. Kate Purley, where's Kate? There she is. I'm sorry, I didn't get your video working. I didn't figure that out until just now. She's with the Santa Clara Community Organization. Carolyn Burke is our Parks Planning Manager. Emily Proudfoot is our Principal Landscape Architect. Philip Richardson, Landscape Architect. Jesse Carey Hobbs, he is our Natural Areas Operations Supervisor. Shelley is with our Ecological Services. She's our supervisor. Lori Holtz is our ecologist. You've probably seen her out there on the site working diligently. Our traffic engineer is Chris Henry. And Michelle Parkins is our volunteer coordinator. And Ethan Wing is our section manager for Youth and Family Recreation Services. So with that, I think I'm going to put Philip on the spot and ask him to read out loud our first question and see who might need to address that.
Okay. The first question was, is the walk path only for pedestrians or is it going to be for bikes as well?
Good question. So the walk path, and let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and, are we still seeing my screen? The map, is the map back up? Thank you.
Yes.
So this main walk that runs through our site here is going to be meant for pedestrians and bicyclists, but of course this is a park, so this is not a dedicated bike lane or a bike path, but we are making it extra wide so that we can accommodate both of the uses. You'd see that in some of our other parks. Tugman Park is one example where we've widened a section of the park out to 12 feet so that it's more comfortable for bicyclists that are running adjacent to the park to either stop and join or continue and pass through.
Okay, thanks. Another question is, are there any native pollinator plantings in the plan?
That's a great question. And at a master plan level and our design concept level, we certainly haven't begun to start looking at that kind of detail, but we do hear that question a lot. One of the things I will say, and I'll also tag Shelley Miller and Lori perhaps who can help us, because they've been integrally involved in both protecting these areas. As you know, they're a Goal 5 resource. These creek beds here are remnants, old oxbows of the Willamette. And so in addition to the value those native plantings have, I know they've been working a lot in order to make sure that the fields and everything are kept up and maintained. But as far as pollinators, I think I'm just going to let them talk a little bit and we'll see where that goes. Shelley?
You need to unmute.
I am not going to talk because my dog is squeaking her squeaky toy like crazy. So I'm going to let Lori talk. She's actually stopped for right now. But
hi there. This is Lori. And yes, Mark is correct. We're not at a stage where we've identified any particular native species for the site. But typically with our natural areas, and certainly as part of major development like this, we'll incorporate native seed and maybe identify areas where we can do some native plantings, including pollinator species. We usually try to choose a diverse suite of species that provide, multiple, values for different species, whether it's birds, pollinators, and so on.
Thank you, Lori. And how would that compare? I'll put you on the spot here. This portion of our site is currently a big open field. I think we did a field trip out there at one point. And there's a meadow planting out there. How would that compare to the meadow planting that's out there now? Is that the kind of thing that we would expect in this natural area and trails?
Well, yes, and again, it's something that we'd have to look at. What's out there are probably primarily, non-native grasses that are fairly aggressive. And so we haven't done any, very thorough investigations for native forb species anyway at the site, but that's something that could happen in the coming year or so, to take a look at that and see if there's some species that we want to preserve. But likely based on the history of the site, it's fairly heavily impacted. And so there may not be a whole lot of native pollinator type species present on the site at this point. So we may need to introduce those. There are some nice pockets of native riparian forbs and shrubs, as well as trees, particularly in the two southern waterway reaches. That northern reach is a little bit more impacted by all the homes that are on the west side. But we'd certainly be looking to enhance all three of those areas and the meadow areas that you're mentioning there.
Thank you. And again, I'm glad you pointed out that this is, we're calling these natural area and trails, but these are a little different from our natural areas parks, where we have a large dedicated acreage of park with native species. This is a community park in a neighborhood. So we'd certainly be open to looking at some of those pollinators.
Okay, next question.
Philip, yes, please.
All right. Let's see. I think maybe this is a two-part question, or there's two questions from the same attendee. Is it possible to change or add to the path in the southwest corner? I think that would be the southwest corner of the north section. So walking in the natural area doesn't require walkers to go past the future basketball and pickleball courts.
I see. So reconfigure. So the concern is maybe having that natural area experience come very close to those courts. So I think what I'm hearing is there a way to reconfigure the path so that you don't come closer to those? We can certainly look at that. But right now what we're doing is trying to maximize some efficiency here with both the paved walk that comes in here and accesses the court sports, integrating with the natural areas walk. They will cross at some point. But for this one, I went ahead and looped that in on the top just so that I can shorten some of our size and try and get a little bit more bang for our buck and try and add one more thing into our phasing plan for phase one. So we'll work on those things and balance them with all the other parts of the project. Good question, though.
Yeah, and then a follow-up to that, are these natural area paths going to be maintained as bark trails?
Yes, right now the intent is that these would be a mulch trail, bark path mulch trail, but this is not on the order and engineering as what you may have heard recently in the news of the Amazon running trail, for example. That's a very dedicated, engineered, high-end special trail. We love that trail. This is more of the trail, the walk through the woods like you would see in some of our other parks. There's one actually at, is it Oak Ridge? Forgetting the name.
Oakmont?
Oakmont, I'm sorry, Oakmont, right across from my eyeglass person. Optician.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
The next question is will there be bike parking in phase one?
In phase one, yes, we are looking at doing some bike parking in phase one. Let me see if I can move to a closer, oops, there we go. Let's see. So phase one, since we're having our playground, it makes sense that we have this bike parking that's there for the playground itself. We are showing some bike parking here next to the skate spot, also close to the playground. But since the skate spot is a future piece, that bike parking would not go in right away. And we're also showing some bike parking down here by the pickleball courts. and basketball courts. So since that is part of a future phase, that parking would also be deferred with those future phases. But yes, we are planning for some bike parking right up front. And since this is the only spot currently, maybe what we should be doing is, as part of that interim phasing, is start looking for some that's going to address a little bit closer to the restroom and maybe the schoolhouse, depending on what that timing is. So good question.
I'll add briefly, Mark, that we are required by code to provide bike parking spaces, and sometimes the number of spaces will be dictated by the level of development that we're pursuing on the site. So I think likely in phase one, we might have a few more than what's showing here now. But again, this is a master plan level, and to get to that next level of detail, we'll certainly be engaging that next level of design as we go into a phase one set of projects.
Thank you, Emily.
Okay, actually, this is the final question. So if you have questions on your mind, please type them in, because we still have time to answer more. The question is, can the phase one parking lot off River Loop 2 be scaled back to allow for some play courts to be constructed if shared parking can be obtained with the Madison Middle School?
I think I see where this question is going, and it's a good thought. Actually, could you bring that question back? Oh, I see, there it is. It's in the answered questions. So what I'm hearing is courts, and what I'm guessing is, since some of these courts aren't in, you like the idea of maybe using some of that paved area on the north for some of those, whether it's the pickleball or probably not the basketball. I'm guessing this is a pickleball related question. And then I think I said it was a loaded question. I think what I meant was that as soon as we start talking about using the parking out here at the Madison Middle School as our parking, now we get into a different relationship with our 4J school district. So the school district has a very limited amount of parking, and it's intended for the school. And when we develop our park, we are required to, and we want to, provide parking for the park. Which is so that people can get to the playground, the lawn, the schoolhouse, etc. So while there is a parking lot there and it is close to this park and area, certainly on weekends, if there are no objections with the school and it works with their schedules, I think overflow parking is something that can be discussed. But to plan for that right from the start and occupy those parking spots and not have them available is probably not something we would go into in a phase one plan. So, but I think what I'm also hearing is, darn, we're not having those courts down there on the south end. And we would really love to develop all of this as soon as possible. And we just want you to know that, especially with the skate spot element and the things that we heard that were high on our list there, we're committed to really working at that phase two over the next several years here to see what we can add as far as those park amenities to the park. So, but again, it becomes a process like this, and there's a lot of give and take there with designs and phasing and construction, what you can build when. So the nice thing I will just say is, this whole edge here that's just kind of right now as part of the natural area, is that when it's time to start developing these courts here and the skate spot and extending this main walkway all the way down, that all of that can occur from this future half of the parking lot as far as construction and staging without impacting the rest of the park. So people still get to come and use the park and enjoy it while we do that future construction. So we're thinking about those kinds of things too. And sometimes all that doesn't come out in a presentation or in a document on the website. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I might put in a plug just for the third survey as well. So there are questions in there about how the priorities, and this question may have to do with, dang, my priorities would be a little different. So yeah, take the survey and thanks for the question. Okay, next question here. Okay, I got a few more. Good. This one is it looks like the entry to Madison Middle School is being moved. Students may end up cutting through the natural areas, creating a separate natural path not in the design. Is there a plan to deal with that?
Actually, we didn't move the access, and come to think of it, the idea of including this piece of that access along with the natural area or along with the trail system that we would like to have in this phase one, That's probably something that we should talk to 4J about sooner rather than later, because we know people are going to want to come in here. We didn't move that. It is aligned with the sidewalk, and all it needs there is a gate and permission, a little negotiation. But I'll tell you that we also talked to the principal of the school, and he asked specifically if we can add some access over here to the main walk and this natural area, because he really liked the idea, not just of being able to go out there and use that natural area, because they do that from time to time. They have a gate right here on this edge. So we actually have a future trail coming in down here that comes right up to that gate. But his second reason was when they have the emergency drills for the school, they all like to come out and they hang out in this area. And he thought it might be nice if that gate was accessible and they had somewhere to walk out there and connect to. So we're in good conversation with the school about that, and we're thinking about that.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Are all of the group shelters open-sided?
Yes, open-sided shelters.
Okay, that was good. Curious if the temporary dog park is going to be fenced. Currently, several, I would say most people are using both park areas for dog walking all over. So that's the question.
Yes, in fact, this fence line right here is just shy of 6 acres, and we usually use three plus as our cutoff for a dog park to allow us to be able to sort of crop rotate those areas and maintain them. And so by allowing for 6, it really allows us to do that comfortably. Plus we have the space, and we think that, you know, having that fencing enclosing that dog park is really what makes it a dog park. The only thing we're not showing right now is the separation of how big the little dog area is and how we connect the little dog area and the 2 different entries and that sort of thing. A few details that have to be worked out, but yes, we'd love to have that all fenced in.
Okay. Will there be easy access to the park from Madison Middle School so it can be accessed for educational use, especially the natural areas and community garden? Perhaps they can help with a historical survey and help create educational posting.
Sure. So I think we covered part of that with the last question. Maybe I have a zoomed in slide here. Let me just see if I can scroll up a bit. There we go. So this is our connection to Madison Middle School. You can actually see on the aerial photograph, this is kind of grayed back. There's a large tree there on the corner, and then the sidewalk actually parallels the fence. And then from there, the way we get there now is we, you know, wrap around and then kind of walk onto the trails. Right now, the trails just kind of informally loop along this edge here. But the other location is just off the map here. So maybe the other one was better. The other location is going to be it's directly across from this bar on the school, this large protrusion on the school. There's an existing gate out there, and that's one that's controlled by the school. They have their padlock on it. I think they actually use it for access and for mowing operations in there too. So that's the one that the principal talked to me about. And I'm sorry, his name is slipping my mind at this moment. So thank you.
Okay, next question is, will the irrigated field have underground water lines?
Most likely, yes. So irrigated would be pop-up sprinklers or rotors, depending on the size of the area, to irrigate that. Yes. And the community garden will as well once that goes in, but that's not shown in the first phase.
Okay, this will be the last question unless you folks come up with some more.
We'll read slowly so that everybody can type and put in more questions.
Actually, I like this. This is a great question. Do you have a mole combat plan? They are pretty bad in both fields.
Oh boy. Okay, I think I need to call for help on this one. Or what's that TV show where they say I need to ask?
Lifeline.
I need to is my lifeline.
You get one call, dude.
Who's my lifeline? Use my lifeline on this. I'm hoping that maybe.
I don't think you have a developed park supervisor here who are mole experts are not in the room tonight.
Yeah, so that sounds like that's a problem that.
Is that an IPM though issue that we would use our IPM policy?
Tell us what IPM is, Philip, and then maybe Lori, you can expand on that.
Well, I believe it stands for Integrated Pest Management, which is just a policy to minimize the kind of bad things that we do in terms of, pesticides and stuff. But I'm not an expert on it, so I'd go to Lori or Jesse for that.
I know we do control moles in other places in the park system. You guys can imagine Alton Baker with its similar kind of loamy river soils would be a pretty popular spot for moles. And in fact, our staff do work on controlling them there. Probably mostly live trapping and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's a good point. I don't. I think that's the kind of thing that we start talking about in the design phase.
All right, I'll add to that. This is Lori, and our IPM policy does talk about thresholds for different pests in different areas of our park system. And so I will say that probably control of moles would be different in the irrigated lawn than it would be in the natural area. And that would be articulated again in the IPM policy that we have that's available for anybody to take a look at on the website. We do manual control, as Jesse mentioned, in the developed park of Alton Baker using traps that are placed carefully down in holes and protected so that an unwanted animal, a non-target animal, doesn't get hurt. But I don't believe our IPM policy includes any kind of poison or anything like that. It would be sort of based on how bad, what the threshold, what the population was, what the damage was in the particular area where the moles might be.
Okay.
That make sense?
I think Kate wants to jump in on this one. Oh, nope, you're still muted. Oh, maybe she doesn't. Maybe she doesn't.
I
don't
Yes.
think that was my expertise. I mean, I trapped voles and gophers and all kinds of creatures out at the farm, but I can't imagine trying to do it for the entire park.
Okay. Sorry, I thought you were reaching for the unmute button, and so I picked on you.
That's okay.
Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we do. We have about three.
Great.
So the entrance to Madison Middle School is closer to Julia Loop, and the entrance shown is currently a fence. I think it's maybe a statement, but I'm not sure if that's something you want to respond to.
Julia Loop. I'm guessing Julia Loop is probably, let's see, I'm trying to get my cursor here. I'm guessing Julia Loop is here.
That's correct.
And so, yeah, this path is intended to give a connection so that the neighbors have access to the park. And yes, this is a 4J fence that runs along here. So this is the phasing plan. So I shaded this back, but I think we'll probably add that back in. Let me go to the overall plan. Right here, we're planning on putting in a gate. So this is a paved concrete sidewalk that connects to the paved 4J concrete sidewalk. And so we'd put in a little pedestrian gate there, and the school would have some control over that so that during school hours, those gates are usually closed. And, if there are events going on, certainly on their fields, then they've got some control over that. But in general, when the public needs to come in and go to the park, it's another way of access. Plus allows the students a way in there.
Are there any existing wells on the property that could be used for irrigation? We have looked into this, Mark.
We're partway looked into this. We do have some wells out there. There are some wells that are have been out of use for such a long time that they're probably not, at least from a water rights standpoint, feasible, but there are some that may be. So we're still in the process of looking at that, because if we can tap into that irrigation or that well water for irrigation, see, I gave it away. If we can tap into that well water, that's going to save us a lot of money on irrigating, certainly these large areas here. And it's something that we do in other parts of our park. So those systems are a little bit different, need a little more filtration and that sort of thing. But again, it has to be balanced with a bigger picture of water rights and use and what we should be doing and pulling out of that aquifer or not. So we're working on that.
Okay. I have a question about grasses. Are there grasses we could use in the park that would maybe need less watering for the irrigated field section?
It's a good question. I think I'm going to ask for my lifeline again here, but I will say that I'm a recent transplant from Colorado. I know there we've been having the low water use conversations for many years. It's certainly a much more dry and arid climate. Um, there are several new sod species that are on the market that are upwards of about 40% less water use than standard Kentucky bluegrass turf, but still hold up to the foot traffic. And that's the issue is sure, you can find grasses that use much less water, but there are very few of those that stand up to traffic. And unless you irrigate your fields that have the traffic on them, and that's why sports fields are irrigated a whole lot, is so that they can recover. Allowing those grasses to recover is very important. And one of the nice things about having a park is that we can provide an irrigated area that everybody can enjoy, and we're watering in one place, and it's one big area, so that individual people don't have to be doing that by themselves in their own lawns and having their own irrigated spaces. So that's one of the benefits of having a public park is we can have some of those special amenities, and where there are a lot of people benefiting from them, I think it's probably okay to use that irrigation. But I understand the sensitivity and the question, to using lower water use grasses. So I honestly, I haven't dug into that too much here in Oregon as far as what the species are there. I think we called it a EnviroTurf is what the local companies called it, but I don't think they're appropriate for this climate.
I think our developed parks folks are using fescues, hybrids that are built off the tall fescue line because they have much deeper root systems, but they do have dwarf fescues. Of course, I'm a natural resource person, so I'm just kind of picking up from my colleagues down the hall. The other thing I'll say is that the city uses smart irrigation controllers. So we use a weather station. We look very carefully at the evapotranspiration rate every day, and that actually affects the schedule of the watering. So we have a very sophisticated watering system that really looks to reduce the irrigation used, the amount of water used.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Are the natural walking paths going to be lit?
Probably not. And I did not bring a lighting plan. I think we had one in a previous session and slide. Let me just back up to one here and see if I can kind of walk over this one. So our main walkways, especially this extra wide one that's going to connect us down to the bike path, that's one that we're probably going to light because we want to safely be able to get people from here up to here. In general, we don't light all of our natural areas, and in a park this size, lighting is very expensive. I have to say, our purpose for providing lighting is not so that there's night use, especially night use of things like courts and playgrounds. We do have closure hours. Our parks are closed at 11. Yes, it is dark before that, well before that, but we provide those lights so that if people are still in the park when the sun goes down, wherever they are in these hardscaped areas, that they have a safe means of egress so that they can get out to the street and back to where they need to go home, whether it's the main walkway or their car or walk back to the house. But generally, these natural areas are not.
Okay. Thank you. Again, right to our last question. So think of some more. Will the sidewalk on River Loop 2 put the overhead wires underground? And will this also affect side street wires or add sidewalks? And then will sidewalks extend down River Loop 2?
I'm going to answer the latter part of that first. Will sidewalks extend down River Loop 2? Not with the park design project, but that then starts to get into a couple things. One is that road is, a county road, And so currently, the way that works is there's no sidewalk on those county streets. Since we are developing the park and we are the developer, and so the city, us, is going to require the city, us, to go ahead and put in those improvements along our park frontage here, just the way a developer would. And that stops at the limit of our property, which is here and here. And the same will occur down here on the south end. Now, we are, of course, thinking ahead. We do know that there's a very short section here along Wilkes Drive in front of Madison Middle School that would make this connection really great for everybody, because right now the bike path stops here. So we're already chomping at the bit to get at that. But again, that's down the road on the phasing. Your question was on River Loop 2. And so no, it will not extend down those roads until such a point that either the county or the city has that as part of their system plan or part of their street plan and projects. And I might extend a lifeline out here to Chris to make sure I don't overstep on that piece of this too much. Did I explain that well enough, Chris?
I believe so. We're only developing the frontage here, and it will take coordination with Lane County because of jurisdictional issues to have any further investment to connect, say, all the way to River Road or other locations. And I think you mentioned, or if you didn't, there's a path that would extend from Beaver Street. Did you talk about that, Mark?
Beaver Street. No.
So the Riverbank Pass system crosses underneath Beltline Highway.
Oh, yes.
And then up Beaver Street, and where Beaver turns into Hunsaker, a path connection would continue to the north to this area.
And then it would pop out over here at Wilkes and River Loop 1, yes. Yeah, on the map, yes. I'm sorry, I wasn't making a connection with the street, but I knew the project, I just didn't know the name.
Another walking facility.
Another walking facility, yeah, biking facility, yes. So, and I'll just add to that, because I know some people have had concerns in the past, and we've had similar questions. Just because the park is doing the sidewalk and the boulevard, that is not a trigger for the city to start annexing property or talking about other, extensions down the road. Those processes happen on their own timeline. We're probably well ahead of them, and because we're developing the park in here. So, again, there's not really that concern from an annexation standpoint. There was another part of that question too, but I think I've forgotten.
Well, yeah, about power lines. Like, would the any work there put the overhead wires underground?
That's a good question. We do know from some current projects that cost is pretty darn high. And so our question would probably start with where do those lines come in, and does that interfere with any of the program uses and that sort of thing. So for example, on that north end, we have our parking area and the orchards. We do have, in the example I'm thinking of now, we have a park where those power lines run through the middle of the park. And there it's kind of a big deal, because you kind of take the only open space that you have and it's blocked up by the power lines. But here it's probably again a negotiation, a budget question, and then a use and program priority as to whether or not we down those lines. But again, we're parks designers. We're designing the park. As soon as we get into EWEB and power and all that sort of thing, that takes on its own schedule and timeline and process. So it's really hard for us to speak about it, even with all the people that we have here, just because that brings in a whole nother entity.
Great. Oh, good. Questions are coming in. I got about 5 here. Let's see. What about the use of pervious pavement for any of the hardscape? Could be a good opportunity to showcase how this works.
Sure, I'm familiar with pervious pavement. It's it's definitely a cost premium, and I know what it does. Pervious pavements can allow for the infiltration of water. I can't tell if I think Carolyn's saying she can't hear me here. For water infiltration,
I can hear you, Mark.
they often have really very well engineered subgrade in order to take that water away. In some cases, you can actually store that water, But again, all of these start to get into some very expensive ideas. Those types of solutions are probably best tackled by some of our larger corporations that put in these, really fancy buildings and such. I think we're certainly happy. Oh,
We have used pervious pavement on
okay.
park projects.
Pavers, pervious pavers,
No.
with the corners that are knocked off.
A pervious concrete out off of Green Hill Road,
Okay.
the park access out there. So we do have experience with it. I don't know what our current standards are, but the city doesn't need to demonstrate it. We've already used it in different environments. So we have experience with it.
And tell me a little more about that parking lot at Green Hill, because I've been there and I've seen it, and I have some.
Meadowlark Prairie is the name of the park, I believe. I'm not a park staff person.
Yeah. So does it get vacuumed regularly? I think that was one of the issues early on with pervious concrete. I don't know if that's something that's been solved.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's very functional. I mean, we're not sure, but it's had problems with crumbling surface and that sort of thing.
Yeah, Emily, did you want to weigh in? You had your.
Yeah, actually, I have some thoughts about it. So I think pervious concrete probably has come a long way, and pervious surfaces are a great way, I think, to address stormwater treatment. In this case, and in the River Road area in general, our water table is pretty high. And so if you're going to infiltrate the water, and not take it off site, you have to have a certain distance between the high water table and where you're treating that water. And so I'm not sure it'd actually be, like, from an engineering and a water quality standpoint, if it'd be a viable option to infiltrate water at this site. Having said that, any stormwater treatment off any pervious surface is a requirement, again, by code, throughout our any of the park development work that we do. And park settings are really wonderful places actually to showcase really beautiful stormwater treatment planters or filtration or any of those kinds of things. So especially with a site of this size, I think we have some really nice opportunities actually to treat, to have very visible treatment of our stormwater.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. What is the land use approval process, if any, for the park master plan? Does it have to be presented to Eugene and or Lane County Planning Commission for adoption?
I could weigh in on that one, Mark.
Certainly.
So as long as we are following the code that is required for this particular type of development, we don't have to get approval from the Planning Commission or the City Council for that master plan. However, we do need to get approval to annex the property. So right now we're outside of the city limits because we are newly incorporated into the urban growth boundary. So we do have an annexation proposal into the planning department, and I'm pretty sure that goes to both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So that's the one step where we do need that. But beyond that, as long as we are kind of addressing our setbacks from adjoining properties and complying with all of our setbacks for natural resources and things like that, there shouldn't be any other processes related to land use.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question. Is there capacity to include tennis as an option in the court area?
Probably not at this time. Certainly not at this late time in the master planning process. Tennis courts take up a lot of space. I think we've seen a lot of our current tennis courts have been converted to pickleball. So it's just one of those things where we're looking at what drives the community need out there, and tennis just wasn't on our radar until this question, honestly.
Okay.
Emily, I think Emily's going to add.
Sorry.
Mark, I just wondered if tennis courts, how they ranked in some of the, if those were some in our ranking, and I don't remember tennis courts ranking very sort of high in our surveys. So I just thought I'd check in about that, because a lot of the survey information we get kind of drives some of the space choices that we make on these projects.
Yeah. And it was not, no. So Thank you,
Okay.
Philip.
Yeah, so what is the plan for that slice crescent of land that's east of the easternmost Santa Clara waterway arm, west of River Loop 1? Just a question about if there's a plan for that.
Not currently. Some of our other plans is probably an oversight. Showed a possible location of a bridge here, depending on what we develop for that. But we've been honestly been scratching our heads a little bit. It's a little bit. It's a really small sliver and piece. It would be nice to have at least a small pedestrian bridge across to the future dog park out there, and that would help activate that space so that it isn't this leftover piece in there. But again, that's probably out there in future phases.
Actually, question came from two places, and this one here that I just put to the answer. If you're following me, it's that there could be plantings done with community member volunteers, so that maybe that's a be planted out with native trees and shrubs. So just a possibility of a volunteer project maybe there.
Sure.
I can speak to that a little bit. This is Lori, and I think that little sliver is has a lot of potential for enhancing as a natural area. That, as it's labeled there, arm of the Santa Clara waterway is actually one of the nicest of the three in terms of the riparian tree species that are there. And so down the road, it is something we could consider doing, enhancing that edge and maybe infilling a little bit of that crescent area. It'd have to be, something we consider along with all our other work that we do in our natural areas, but it certainly has a lot of potential, and especially if we could utilize volunteers to implement a project like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, back to our last question, unless people are going to send us more. Is there any intention of purchasing more land to give a greater connection between the north and south portion of the park?
Now I'm pointing at you, Philip.
Is that a question for me?
I think it is.
I think we are interested for sure. I mean, anytime we do acquisition, it's with willing sellers. That's just the only way we acquire land. As a community park, this is on the sort of small end of community parks. So I think anything we can do to make it larger is good. We have talked to a landowner there, and just haven't made that happen yet, but we're certainly still interested in it. And then I guess I could put a plug in for just sort of the bigger Santa Clara area, particularly with Willamette waterfront. Most of you may know that we purchased about 7 acres not far away from this that has Willamette frontage just north on River Loop 1. And we have a big vision that would give us, a connected, a natural frontage connection as much as we can get from Beltline all the way north to Heileman Landing. We're a ways away from that, but I always like to say, the Ridgeline Park was a vision people had, 80 years ago. And we're getting pretty close now here, 80 years later, to making that happen. So, or to getting a connected series there. So the answer is yes. And if anybody has knowledge of places, please, that might be for sale or interested landowners, let us know. Carolyn, I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in more on that one.
And who's the typical person who we'd reach out to? Would that be Philip Richardson?
You could send me an email.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Would love to talk to you. Okay, another question here. In walking through the area over the past couple of years, I have found a number of interesting relics from the old homesteads on the site. Is there any interest from the Santa Clara Community Association in displaying historical items or artifacts at the old schoolhouse? Maybe that's for you, Kate.
Well, certainly that's a possibility, and we've talked. We have to come up with contingency plans. So if our plan for our community organized multi-purpose community building, which will act as a nexus for community functions for the interim till we come up with a larger community center for our area. If that somehow falls on its face, we also entertain the idea of some form of historical museum, but certainly they aren't mutually exclusive. So if you have something interesting and you'd like us to hold on to it and display it, or maybe there would the vision for what would happen in the schoolhouse could be everything from classes to meetings to even rentable space for private events. And so there could be art openings, or in your case, historical artifact displays that are revolving displays for things that would help build community and tie people into what goes on in their neighborhood. So it's a long answer to a short question, with the answer being an expanded version of yes.
And especially if that artifact came with a donation to help the schoolhouse get off the ground, right?
I'll add, I've been the project manager for the Downtown Riverfront Park, and I've learned some things about archaeological surveys and thinking, about history on sites. And I think, likely before we did a ton more work on this site, we would probably have an archaeological survey performed, knowing that there are sort of homesteaded artifacts out here. So if you're working with just in the state and you don't have federal funding for a project, which we're not planning on for this site as of yet, the artifacts, if they're 75 years or older, then they are of interest to, to the state as far as historical artifacts go. And they may or may not catalog them. It kind of depends what they are. But especially if they're sort of made in Eugene, that's of real value. So I think, I think sort of there is some historical interpretation, I think, here that we can do as well. And maybe that, archaeological survey can be a part of that conversation. In any case, I think, it's an important part of a part of this site. And, there are people who have lived here for a long time and really understand that. So I think it should be shared.
A couple more questions and a comment that that crescent area we were talking about has had active osprey nests, I guess, in the past. So just that something Lori would be very interested in. Okay, tennis court question again. In a mixed use court design, they both function in a similar square footage. And then on another topic, that the swale seems like a good option for parking runoff. And then another comment, purchasing more land would offend me. I hope and encourage you take the community temperature before doing so. I guess I can respond briefly to that. It's like, obviously our intention is never to offend anyone. And yeah, acquisition sometimes, people have different ideas about it. But as I said, we would really only be doing so with a willing seller. So I don't know if you want to, Mark, talk about tennis court anymore.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure. And we certainly have enough space in our 35 acres here to address all of the needs that we've seen from our surveys and workshops and future community center and dog park. Just from the bigger picture, we're not waiting on any kind of acquisition. We're here now because we have what we need. So that's sort of an aside conversation. The question about tennis, yes, there can be shared use tennis, but again, we looked at the survey and tennis did not rank high in the survey. So we're, the footprint of 2+ pickleball courts is about a tennis court. But again, then we get into striping. Tennis courts, actually, because of their large footprint, a lot of those have to have post-tension concrete put in them. That's super expensive. That's something that we can do a little bit easier with the pickleball courts just because of their smaller footprint. So, yes, there are certainly cases where you could double up on that, but again, it's driven by community need, and we heard a lot from a pickleball contingent that that's something that this area would use, and we responded to that. The last question, let's see, there was a third one. There was the purchase, there was the tennis, and there was the swale as a, yeah. So at this point in time, we haven't drilled down into the details of what and how many water quality features we have. We have several options that are not anything that I've illustrated for a public use, but typically that comes down to how we're bending and tipping and draining water. So for example, in this parking lot, my thought is we're going to split it down the middle. Half goes down here. We have a stormwater feature that's integrated with this planter that clears and takes care of that water. This half goes this direction and a large piece here. We try not to sprinkle that around too much because the cost of putting in all those walls and beds and treatment is best done in sort of grouped areas. Swales again, are probably the least effective at removing deposition and sediment because it can continue through that, but there are ways of doing that. And certainly because we are so close to these waterways here, we're going to look at the most economical, but primarily we're going to look at the ones that do the best job of mitigating stormwater and pollutants and runoff from our parking lots and the oils that come out of cars and all that sort of thing, because from our perspective, we are just as overjoyed to have these, functional oxbows, especially this great one here that Lori mentioned that has these really great species in it. We wouldn't want to do anything to compromise those. So we'll look at all those options and look at the right engineering solution for them.
Okay. Two more. Is the sidewalk around the schoolhouse going to be put in by the city, or would that be the Santa Clara Community Organization responsibility if they acquire the schoolhouse?
I'll weigh in on that one. I don't think we've gotten to that level of planning yet. I know that, as Kate said in her portion of the presentation, we're going to be entering into an agreement. And I think as we kind of negotiate that agreement, we'll figure out who's responsible for what. And so that's just the level of detail we're not to yet.
Thank you. And in fact, I'll point out as well, this access to the front and back and the design is not something that we're super married to, but we wanted to show something, and we can't show it as a blank without any kind of a connection. We know there are a couple feet difference between the ground floor of the schoolhouse and the ground level. So for an ADA access, we need some kind of ramping to get to some portion of that. But whether or not the community organization has the front door as the main entry or the back door or the side, all of that is going to weigh into some of this. So there will be some kind of a connection from the sidewalk to this main connector here. It may not look exactly like this, but it's going to function the way it needs to work with the program that the community organization has for the schoolhouse.
Okay, last question, unless you give us some more. Do you have any site acquisition funds remaining from the 98 and 2006 bond measures? Carolyn probably knows most about that. We do have some.
No funding from 1998 bond measure.
Right.
That one is all wrapped up. And I don't recall there being any acquisition dollars in that one. That was all development bond. Did a lot of good things. But yes, we do have funding remaining from the 2006 acquisition focused bond. I couldn't tell you the amount offhand, but we do have some dollars left in that. As Philip mentioned earlier, we buy from willing sellers, and so it's hard to sometimes spend that money in a defined period of time, and it takes time to find the right piece of property and the right person who's willing to sell. And so we're just making sure we make good decisions with that funding. And I'm really grateful that we still have it, so that when opportunities do come up, we can take advantage of them.
Thank you. Okay, another one here. Will there be any fencing or other barriers planned for the east space to keep cars out of the field space? People currently drive around at night and tear up that field.
Yes, and I am trying to get to a slide here. There it is. So I think we're talking about this area here. I did get to see a wonderful video that one of our neighbors shared with us of somebody doing donuts out in the field. Couldn't quite make out the license plate. But yes, we are planning on doing some access control here. on this edge, and how that extends and ties into the future dog fence here, we're in the process of working out. But that access control is going to happen before we start doing some of the formal construction for the park, because that's about protecting our park and resource and curbing some of that illicit behavior. Right now, this whole corner is pretty much at grade with the street, so this is kind of where people come in and start doing, their driving around. As you get a little bit further to the west, you pull a vehicle off of that and it's kind of sitting like this. So it's probably needed a little bit less down here, but that's the kind of thing that we have to design and figure out. So yeah, we'll put something in there. Thank you.
I have no more questions for you.
Awesome. Well, let's do this then. Why don't we talk about our next steps here for a minute? And of course, somebody might still bring up a question, and if we have time, we can certainly do that. Our next steps. Ooh, where's my cheat sheet here? Hang on a second. Very good. So next steps, our third and final survey is live, and that's what's going to be your opportunity to give us some feedback on the draft master plan and on the phase 1 priorities. So we put something forward for the priorities based on what we heard in the surveys, and we think we got it right, but we want to hear from you. Once that survey closes, we will share those results via the project website on Engage Eugene, and then we're going to digest those, and we'll develop a final master plan and a final phase 1 plan, and we'll post that on the website. So, and if you're part of that email list, I will be sending you an email that says, hey, we just posted something new, let's take a look. So we'll get that follow-up via email and the website. The next year is going to be taken up with some budget validation, construction documentation, and engineering, design drawings, that sort of thing. Followed by that, in as early as 2022, maybe 23, we'll start construction on that phase 1, which should just be awesome. So thank you. We will have the workshop recording from tonight available in the next day or so. I think it takes just overnight to buffer, so I will get that up there as soon as we can. Please do sign up and take the survey. Sign up for notifications if you haven't already. Feel free to send it to your friends. They won't mind. And if you have any questions that may have come up after this presentation, you thought about it, you can still reach me. You can reach me at this phone number, 541-682-4902, or my email, mkosmos@eugene-or.gov. I will not read that in Spanish because it is rusty, but we are certainly glad that you came. We want to thank you for your time, and I wanted to thank our panelists here for their time as well. It's been great. And I guess the only other thing that we didn't plan for is finishing this early, everybody. So I think maybe what I will do is, since we have a lot of folks, and I see a new question just popped up, so Philip's going to read that for us. I'll bring a plan up again here. I think at some point I'd be very comfortable releasing everybody so that we don't have to sit for the full remaining 40 minutes here, but I will stay online so that if somebody joins in late and says, hey, I missed the whole thing, maybe we can just at least answer some questions and then point folks to the recording. So, but I think it's pretty much just people that have been with us since the beginning. So Philip, go ahead and let's see what
Well,
question we
we
have
just a
on.
great job, you guys, and thanks.
Oh, read that one again. Read it again. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
everybody
Thanks,
who
everybody.
shows up. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I see Gary, Joel's there, Jerry Finnegan, Ed Singer gave us some good questions. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Bye, Michelle. Oh, darn, Alyssa just left. I was going to ask her if she can clip the rest of the recording if it's just me sitting here for 20 minutes. I'm hoping she can.
He's really thrilling.
Mark, I think
Yes.
you can stop the recording yourself if you're the host.
Yes, I can, but in the event that somebody else shows up, I'm not sure that I can restart it again.
Okay.
So that's a good. We'll probably just go offline here for a little bit. Thank you, Philip. You were an awesome MC today.
Did my best. Hey, thanks, Mark.
Master of
And I think I am going to go ahead and there was a comment in the Q&A, but it's not a question for us. So it's something it's really to me. So,
Gotcha.
but with that, I'm going to say goodbye and thanks, and we'll see
All
you
right.
soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Okay, I'm going to leave you too, Mark.
Okay. And no, I guess we have done this before. I just got the okay from Carolyn. It's okay to close the meeting. So
Okay.
thanks everybody for attending. There won't be any special credits or behind the scenes funny things. I should have done that. Oh my gosh, that would be so awesome, wouldn't it?
Uh-huh. Well, next time.
Next time.
Yes.
Thank you, Kate.